Hey, alrighty. Okay, so this should be an interesting lecture for you. It's always a fun one to do live. It's going to be interesting to see how we do this one this way. A little bit of a challenge, but I think it'll work out fine. This is really core to where you guys are right now. This whole chapter, I hope you're seeing the relevance of this chapter to everything you're learning at university and to your preparations for the final exams. But this might be the most relevant. In fact, often people will ask me, how can I do well in your course? And I posted a video about that a long time ago, but I'm going to come back to that point here and come back to those recommendations, but I'll do so in context. So I want you to really understand why they make sense. So what we're really going to talk about here, if we go back to our good old friend, this is where we're going to be here. So we've talked about working memory and we've talked about long-term memory. But when you think about the goals or the challenges of university, your challenge is to, read and watch lectures. And so those are things happening in your working memory while you're doing that, but you're trying to get them into your long-term memory. You're trying to transfer them into this longer term store so that when you're sitting at your exam, you can pull them out of that and back into your memory to solve certain questions that you're being asked on the exam. And so when you're studying, you're trying to get information into memory. And when you're writing an exam, you're trying to get information out of memory. And so what we're going to talk about is, well, how can you optimize this? How can you encode? That's getting information into memory. How can you encode in the most powerful ways? And how can you then retrieve? Or what can you do to try to optimize your chance of retrieving? That would be the better way to say it at the time of a test. Okay, so we're really going to be focusing in on this interaction between working memory and long-term memory. Cool. All right. So first of all, let's just talk about encoding, break it down a little bit. So in order to encode, you need to use working memories. I've talked about this a little bit more in the course, but let me say this again. There's this notion of people who have photographic memory. And they can just look at a page and memorize what's on that whole page with almost no effort. I'm going to tell you, you can really memorize a lot of stuff. It's possible to put an incredible amount of things in your memory. In fact, now that I just think of this, I might want to show you. I'll include a little video underneath this. I like doing that. Check it out. But you can encode a lot of information very powerfully. But it takes work. And that'll be a bottom line you'll get here. You don't get memory for nothing. You don't get freedom for free. Wait a minute, how did that work? Anyway, that was a Rush line that just came. You can't get something for nothing. Amazing. At any rate, you got to work. You got to put in the time and you got to put in the effort. But if you do that in an intelligent way, you can really enhance your ability to remember things. So those are what we're going to call mnemonic strategies. And I'm going to demonstrate one for you. What these strategies are all about, as you'll see, is about connecting the information you're learning with information you already have. That's the real goal of your encoding, as you're coming across all this new information. And yes, you can just try to memorize it as is, or you can try to really understand it, which means connecting it to things you already know and trying to make sense of how it fits. That's the best kind of encoding. That leads to the most durable memory and leads to it becoming a real semantic memory, something you just know. And so we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to include the retrieval side of things in our discussion. So I'm going to go through these, first encoding, then retrieval, but we're going to connect the two because that's the real point, is they're very connected. So we'll talk about the testing effect just to show that it's not just about encoding information well. You should also practice retrieving that information if you really want to do well on a test. And so we're going to talk about retrieval practice and how it can also help you do better. Also, when we talk about these two things, we can talk about them separately, as I kind of will, but then we're going to connect the two of them together. And we're going to talk about how you can enhance what we call transfer. The chance that if you know how you're going to retrieve the information, how can you study in a way that will optimize your transfer of that learning to the situation where you have to retrieve it. So we're going to talk about a couple of things called transfer appropriate processing and state dependent memory. Okay, so we'll get there, but I just want to kind of roadmap where we're going. Encoding, then retrieval, then we will connect the two. Okay, cool. So let's jump into encoding. And let me just start with a very simple sort of experiment for you. I'm going to show you two lists of words. And what I'd like you to do is I'm going to show you the whole list at once, but then we're going to go through the list and we're going to answer a very simple question about it. And I'm going to let you answer yourself, but I would encourage you to answer aloud. Okay. For one of the sets of words, we're just going to say how many vowels are in each word. Okay, that'll be our task. Count the vowels in the word. So just count them out loud. 1, 3, 2, etc. We'll do that for the second set. For the first set, the one we're going to do now, let's do what I call a good-bad test, a task. So for each word, I want you to decide whether it's a good word or a bad word. Now, I'm not including any swear kind of words. When I say bad words, I don't mean those bad words. These will all be pretty neutral words. But I want you just to try to classify about half of them as good and half of them as bad. So if you had to say, the word shoe, is it a good word or is it a bad word? What would you call it, a good word or a bad word? And so for each word, I want you to kind of think about it. Would I call that good or bad? But try to get about half and half. So you're not just saying good to everything or bad to everything. Try to actually think about it a little bit. Okay. I'm not going to do this out loud because there's no right answers to these. And so I don't want to be saying the opposite of what you're saying out loud. But so I'll ask you to say it out loud. I'll put my mouse on each one and you say good or bad. Okay. You ready? Let's do it. Here it is. Here's the first one. Next one. Pink. Telephone. Pilot, elephant, water, violin, garbage, runner, queen, hillside. Okay. Don't write any of those down, obviously. This is a memory test. Cool. So now, let's do the second list. But again, for this list, what I want you to do is tell me how many vowels are in each of these words. Same thing, I'll put the mouse over them, I'll say the word, you tell me how many vowels there are. Say it out loud. Okay, say it loud, say it proud. Here we go. Clam, flying, bullet, coffee, microphone, paper, yellow, sneaker, dress, bridge, pool. All right. Cool. So now what I want you to do is quite simple. Write down all the words you can remember from both lists. I'm probably not going to give you too much time, so just pause right now. Press pause, write down all the words you can remember. Ready? Pause. Okay, back now. Cool. My bet is if you look at the words, you remembered many more from list 1 than you did from list 2, even though list 1 was further away, and you had a whole other list in between. You'll learn about potential interference effects in your chapter. But despite all those, I bet you remembered more of these. Why? Well, what goes on in your mind when you're doing this? Let's think about it. Let's go over here first. When you're just saying how many vowels, you look 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2. So when you do that, you're just focusing on the structure of the word, right? You're just looking at the letters. And so what we're going to say is you're processing it in a pretty shallow way. Versus over here, yard. Is yard good or bad? Well, what came to mind? Did you imagine a beautiful green yard, like a golf green, in which case you might have said good? Or did you imagine maybe a prison yard? We're going to the yard, which is dull and concrete and bad. For each of these, probably something came to mind. Pink, maybe it was Pink the Entertainer, or maybe it was, the pink crocodile in Masked Singer. Now, yes, I know that. Whatever. And so for each of these items, you thought about the meaning of the word. There's something about that word that probably brought to mind an image or a thought, something much richer. And because of that, what we're going to say is this task, the good or bad tasks, requires a greater depth of processing. It's not just about the surface of the word. It's about something related to the meaning of the word or some previous experience you've had connected to that word. And when you get to that level of meaning, you remember it better. So this is a concept called depth of processing. Okay, and it just says, and this is, by the way, done by a guy named Gus Craig. I should mention, by the way, let me step back. That whole episodic semantic procedural memory thing, that was suggested by a gentleman named Endel Tulving at University of Toronto, and it was a big deal. And so that was a University of Toronto thing, and at that time, University of Toronto was where all the best memory research was being done. Another character that was part of that mix is a guy named Fergus Craik. I have the privilege of kind of knowing both of these people, which is kind of cool. This is Fergus's thing, depth of processing, Craik and Lockhart in the 70s, 1972 actually. And they just did experiments that show that if you present items to people, and you can cue them to process them in a very shallow way, like we just did with the letters. How many letters are there? So now you're just focusing on the physical appearance of the items. You could do something phonological. Does this rhyme with something? So you could get them to the sound of the words, and that's considered a sort of intermediate level. Or you can go much deeper to the semantics to actually encode the meaning and associate it with existing knowledge. This is the good-bad test. And what you find is the deeper you process the information, the more durable it is, the better you will remember it. And so this is why, we sometimes say we'll see students who read a definition and then they just read it to themselves 4 times over. Well, you're kind of doing this stuff, structural, phonological. You're encoding the information that way. And that's okay. Phonological is better than just structural. But if you can get to the actual, what does that mean? Does that make sense? How would that apply in certain situations? Now you're doing the semantic and deep stuff. So this is, one first sort of conclusion for studying. If you want to study well, you want to think deeply about the material that you're learning, and you want to try to connect it all up. There are things called concept maps you could look at as you study for your final exams. Creating concept maps. That's a great way to kind of get you interacting with the material in this deep semantic way. Okay, so I'll just mention that to you, but we're going to talk a little bit more. So let's just keep that depth of processing in mind. But when we get to the mnemonics, which we're going to now, you'll get even better sense of what this is all about, I think. So let's go here. Let's say you think my memory sucks. I'm no good at memorizing stuff. Well, you can be. It's certainly something you can do something about. It's not a physical constraint. So it's not like I have a big memory or I don't have a very big memory. It's not about size. It's about organization, connections, and what we're going to call dual coding. Okay. And you're going to see all this play out in the example I give. So I give you this example just to start you thinking about it. Let's imagine you had a bunch of recipes for all these different foods, and you either have a little tiny box here that's very organized, or you have a great big box that you can just throw recipes in. If you throw them in this big box can hold a lot of recipes, right? It can hold on to a lot of recipes. But if you actually want to find a given recipe in here, then if this one is full of a bunch of recipes, it's going to be really hard to find the one you want. But a much smaller box that's organized in a nice way can help you very quickly find the recipe that you want. And so this is going to be the same sort of story about finding things in memory. It's not about the size of your memory or anything like that. It's about how you organize the information when it's put into memory. And if it's organized in a nice structured way, it'll be much easier to pull stuff out. Okay. This finally leads me to my demonstration that I love to do in class. It's fun in class. Let's see if it'll work the same way here. So what I would do in class is see 14 items here. What I'm going to demonstrate is that
Alakazam! And now, to bring your husband back.
I don't know what's going on.
Hey, Greg. No, now's a good time.
John!
We've all been there. Got a task to do, and then you get distracted.
John! John!
Are you sensing anything?
That's why you need SetApp, a suite of apps to help you complete any task and always finish what you started.
John.
Thank you. Shut up. Okay. I don't know where that came from. That came from here, and I'm going to come back to this. This is an ad on this page, which is great. So let me jump back. Wow, that was weird. Jump back to here. Here's what I'm going to show you using that annoying website that just started talking to me. I'm going to get it. So what it does is it gives random words, this thing. So look, I can just pick it and it'll give me random words. So what I used to do is call out to the audience and say, hey, all of you guys, can you please just give me a word? And hands would go up, and I would create random words, 14 random words. And the demonstration is I can take those words, and I won't spend a lot of time memorizing them, but I'll do something very important as I do. And I will be able to remember all 14 of these words in order. And not only will I be able to do that, but I'll be able to do that after a bit of an interval as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to show you I can do it right away. And then I'll try to do it again at the very end of this lecture, and we'll see if I can. And I don't know if I can. So here's what we're going to do. I've got 14 things here that I'll explain to you. But for each one of these, what we're going to do is add a word to it. So let me just make sure I can get out there for all these. We're going to add a word that's going to be related to that thing I'm showing you. And we'll just do it as we go. So here's the first word. This is going to be a little slow, I'm afraid. Lead. So we'll do lead here. And then we'll do, let me just do about 3, okay? Landowner, observer, sock. Landowner, observer, sock. Okay. Enthusiasm, division, empire. Enthusiasm, division, empire. And then I'm going to have to shut that site so it doesn't start talking at us again. All right. Pi, satellite, toll. Is it toll? Toll. Duh. Okay, let me just correct 2 spelling mistakes before I go any further. Okay. And let me try to do 4 more, see if we can remember 4 now. Cook, door, embrace, splurge. Cook, door, embrace, and splurge. Okay, and again, I'm going to kill it so that doesn't start going on better. Okay, here we go. So, what do we got here? So these are words that just, and I'm intentionally trying not to look at them, because I want to do all my encoding publicly. Let's say. So these are 14 words that I just picked randomly, or that a website picked randomly for me. And let's say I want to now go about the task of memorizing them in order. What am I going to do? Okay, now let's look at the stuff on the left. In order to help me do this, I am going to connect these new words to things that, well, we're going to call them retrieval cues. These are cues that are going to, so I'm literally, it's almost like I'm connecting every new word to something else. And this something else is something I think I'm going to be able to retrieve from my memory easily. And so when I retrieve that easy thing, then I can use it to pull the new thing. So I'm connecting the new thing to something I already know. So those things on the left, what they represent is my pre-COVID ritual. for coming to school. It's kind of funny because this is an old ritual for me now. I don't do this. So one of the things I'm going to have to remind myself is of that ritual. But I'm just right now, I'm going to start encoding. I'm going to walk you through that ritual and I'm going to connect each new word to it. But you'll see I'm going to do something too to try to glue them together. I'm going to use what's called bizarre imagery. I'm going to try to come up with a weird story or an image or something that connects those two, and that'll make them glue together strongly. So let me just show you. I'll start to go through it and we'll get a sense. Okay, first of all, wake up in bed. Okay, so that's how my day begins, right? I wake up in bed, hopefully. that's a good place for the day to begin. And let me see, lead or lead. I'm going to pick lead. Like lead in a pencil, or like lead shot. Shotguns have a bunch of little lead balls. And so here I'm going to wake up and I'm going to say I rolled over and oh my goodness, there's all these little ball bearings underneath me. What the heck? How did these get into my bed? So all this lead shot is in my bed. Lead shot is in my bed. Okay, so I remember that. Okay, fine. So I get up, I leave my bed and I go down and have breakfast. Okay, and when I get down there, there's the guy that owns my land. Well, I'm actually the guy that owns my land, but let's say that's not true. Let's say I'm renting this, and so the landowner who wants to do some work on my land interrupts my breakfast. He's knocking at my door. He says, I want to go do a bunch of stuff on this. I'm going to dig some holes and whatever. And I'm like, what are you doing? Okay, fine. I was trying to have my breakfast here, but go ahead, Mr. Landowner, do what you have to do. Okay, good. So that was my breakfast. After I finish eating breakfast, I take my dog on a walk. And as I'm taking my dog on the walk, I notice there's this dude on the hill with a telescope, and he's looking at everybody, and he's looking at me and the dog, and he's watching us as we walk. So there's an observer sitting there observing everything I do, and I think that's kind of weird. Okay, fine. I'm going to go a little quicker here to give you an idea. I have to remember this ritual, which worries me a little bit. This is where I may fail. But anyway, so I come back from the dog walk and I iron my clothes. And, people think I actually don't iron my clothes much, but let's just say I'm a kind of person who irons everything. Not only do I iron my shirts and my pants, but I even iron my socks. And I'm going to see myself there ironing a sock. Cool, fine. After I iron my clothes, I go in the shower. I love the shower. The shower is fun. I'm in the shower. I'm like, woohoo! I'm enthusiastic in the shower. I don't know. I'm an enthusiastic showerer. So we have that image. Sorry for that image, guys. I come out of the shower and I get dressed. So as I'm trying to get dressed, division with respect to getting dressed. So let's say I go into the closet and I notice that my wife has divided all of my clothes into two piles. A certain pile I'm supposed to wear during the week and a certain pile I'm supposed to wear on the weekend. I don't know. So some sort of division has happened just as I'm going to get dressed. I noticed that. Odd. Okay, fine. So now I'm showered and dressed. I hop in my car to start going to work, and Empire. Wow. So as I hop into my car and put on the radio, for some reason I turn it on and I hear Empire. I don't know. I just had to make that one up. I couldn't get another really good image for Empire. There's certainly not a whole empire inside my car. Well, maybe I'll say it that way. Let me do it that way. So I've seen cars called like Montana, like they're as big as a whole state. And maybe when I went shopping for my car, that wasn't big enough for me. So I bought myself a Ford Empire. Doesn't exist, but I'm going to suggest it does. So when I go out to my car, it's this huge car, as big as an Empire. Okay, that one's better. Fine. Okay, now I hop in the car, and this is now I'm driving to school. I'm in Port Union Village. That's where I live. So as I come out of Port Union Village, there's Mowat High School in front of me. And what do I see them having in Mowat High School? They're having one of these pieing competitions where there's teachers are tied up to a stake and students are pieing them in the face. Ha ha ha. Revenge on you. And I think that's kind of odd. Okay, drive by it. I go down towards Highland Creek Valley as I'm going on my way to UTSC, and satellite. It turns out there's a lot of excitement in Highland Creek Valley because a satellite has crashed right where I turn. There's all these crowds and reporters taking pictures of this crashed satellite. And I think, oh, that's kind of odd. All right, fine. That's Highland Creek Valley. Okay. And so now as I go up and over the road, I come to this big church with a beautiful stained glass window. And for some reason, they've changed the stained glass window. They now have a window of a toll booth, like you drive through with a car. And I think that's not very religious. Why would they have a stained glass toll booth? So that seems very strange to me, but okay, fine. Go by the church, and then I come to the mosque. And that mosque used to be a strip bar, by the way, for many years. It's now a mosque right at the sort of end of Military Trail there, and Cook. Okay, and so I notice oddly that outside the mosque there's a whole bunch of cooks in their white outfits with their tall white hats, and I think, I guess, why not? There can be a bunch of cooks in a mosque. Why does that strike me as strange? But it does, for whatever reason, all these cooks in the mosque. And so now I go up towards UTSC and I'm coming to the parking lot. But suddenly they've installed something in the parking lot. Instead of the arm, there's these big doors that they have to open to let me into the parking lot. Okay, whatever. Drive through the doors to the parking lot. I go and get my coffee at Tim Hortons. I used to. And let's say I'm getting a little too friendly with everybody at Tim Hortons. And so it's such a great experience that I'm embracing everybody in line, as if we could do that anymore. But let's say I have this imagery of coming into Tim Hortons and instead of saying hi to everybody, I'm literally embracing everybody in line on the way down. That's kind of weird. Finally, I come into class and I have splurged. How do I splurge? So splurge usually means to spend some money or to do something great or whatever. I have splurged and I have bought everybody in the class a coffee. That's right. Everybody gets a coffee today, all 400 of you, and it's on me. Okay. Not looking at the words now. So you see what I did? I just went through and I connected all of these to a ritual I know. Actually, let me just go here. Okay, I connected all of those to a ritual I know. I really didn't look at the words very much, and I'm a little worried right now how well I'll do, to be honest, but we'll try. You'll get the idea at least. Part of it's going to be remembering that list on the left in the right order. That's going to be a part of the challenge for me. But let's see how I can do. And you see, I didn't study them very long, but I studied them a certain way. So let's start. Number 1, wake up in bed. There's lead shot in the bed. So number 1 was lead. 2 was breakfast, and when I went down to breakfast, the landowner had some issue, and so I saw the landowner, so that was number 2. The third one is I took my dog for a walk, and there was the observer on the hill. See how easy in some way this is? So observer watching me. Okay, that's great. When I come back from the walk, so now I don't know if it's shower or irons, but so let me say it's shower, I think, is the next thing I do. So my order could be wrong, unfortunately, but if I do the shower, I know the word for shower. Yeah, sure. So let's go to shower. I feel like I'm missing something, but go to shower, and that's enthusiasm. I'm enthusiastic in the shower. And then it was, so there was ironing. So ironing is before shower. I'm pretty sure ironing's before shower. I'm going to say it is. So ironing was sock. So in reality, I'm now at lead, landowner, observer, sock, I think. Then was shower and enthusiasm. Then was getting dressed. Notice I closed my eyes. We naturally do that sometimes when we're reliving the past. So then was getting dressed, and that was division. My wife had divided the clothes into those 2 things. Okay. So I'm dressed, and then I go down to my car, which is the Empire, the big car. I'm driving out of Port Union Village towards Mowat, and they're pieing people in the face, which is kind of weird. I go down towards Highland Creek Valley, and this crashed satellite is there. So there's a satellite. I get to the church, and there's the toll booth in the stained glass, which is weird. So that's toll. Get to the mosque. There was all the cooks outside the mosque. That was odd. Parking lot, the doors letting me into the parking lot. That's kind of cool. I go in. I get to the coffee. I embrace everybody in the coffee line, and then I splurge and get all my class a coffee. So did I get them all? Let's see. As I went through lead, landowner, observer, sock, enthusiasm, division, empire, pie, satellite, toll, cook, doors, embrace, splurge. 14. All 14 in order. Lead, landowner, observer, sock. Excellent, that's right. Enthusiasm, division, empire, pie, satellite, toll, cook, door, embrace, splurge. Bingo. Got him. Okay. 14 random words that I've never seen before that I can recall. And not only can I recall all 14, I can recall them in the correct order. How did that happen? Okay. You know how it happened. You saw how it happened. It was about how I put the words in. I connected them to something I knew, something that I thought I could retrieve and help me then pull that new item out. So this tells you how memory works. It's all about what we call cueing. We whenever, like if someone says, what did you do in Jamaica? They're giving you that Jamaica part, and you kind of use that and say, oh, Jamaica, what did I do in Jamaica? And so everything we pull out of memory, we do so with the use of a cue. That cue is what helps us fish out that new information. And what was doing there is associating the new information with cues that I knew I could retrieve. And if I can retrieve the cue easily, if I can just think about my morning ritual and go through it and retrieve the cue, then I can use the cue to pull out that new information. And that works especially good if I've done some rich semantic kind of deep processing to connect those two. And that was the bizarre imagery I was using. The bizarre imagery was also meaning it wasn't just a word to me now. Empire was no longer just a word. It was a car that was huge, and so we're using visual processing, visual spatial scratchpad kind of stuff, and other things, and we're coding the information in multiple ways, not just as the word, but as an image. And so that provides us multiple things we can retrieve. Okay, these are the so-called mnemonic strategies, and you can learn how to use these to be really effective. In fact, in that video underneath, it's a video to the so-called Memory Olympics. Watch what some of these people can do. They're doing it by using strategies kind of like the one I just described to you. I'll recommend a book at the end that can let you know more. Okay, so that's sort of encoding. This is going to be a longer lecture, I now realize. I probably should have made it 2. It's going to be 1. We're going to keep going. We're going to move to retrieval. And in fact, I want to let you know there's a current professor at University of Toronto, Morris Moscovich, who does a lot of work on memory as well. And he does it really in a neuroscience kind of a way. So he's really trying to get at how memory interacts with the brain. And he's proposed something called the HERA model, Hemispheric Encoding Retrieval Asymmetry. What he's suggesting is that these two parts of the frontal lobe, the right and the left prefrontal cortex, sort of do different things. The left worries a lot about encoding information, encoding episodic information, I should say. It also does semantic memory retrieval, and he's got a whole bunch of evidence for this. Whereas the right, if we just look at episodic, for example, it does episodic memory retrieval. So the left why does his left and right seem wrong to me? Why does it seem wrong? Okay, that's right, left. It is wrong, isn't it? I'm suddenly worried. So at any rate, this isn't really, it's not critical which side of the brain does which, but the idea being that there are different processes involved in encoding and retrieval, but they're kind of connected. They're kind of related to one another. And so the idea here is if you want to be able to retrieve something, yes, getting it into memory is important too. But you should also practice getting it out of memory. Like if I want to remember those 14 items, I shouldn't just focus on putting them in memory the way I did. I should every now and then try to retrieve them. And if I continue to try to retrieve them, then that will make my memory even stronger. So for example, right now I could take a moment and I could say, already tricky, lead, landowner, observer, I'm doing retrieval practice right now, right? Observer, I come back. This is when we're in the shower already. Or no, iron sock, enthusiasm, division, empire, pie, satellite, toll, cook, door, embrace, enthusiasm. I think I got them all. But just doing that every now and then will help me learn that list. Just taking time to retrieve. In fact, you're hearing about this in the textbook and you're living it in this course. We know that this retrieval practice is very powerful. And so here was an example of a study where people were either given, so they were asked to read a short science text using one of these 4 methods, and then a week later they were tested. Okay, so one method was just study the whole time. So we just left people to study. The other one is where we also invited them to do concept mapping. That's what I suggested you look into earlier. This leads to deeper analysis, and look, it leads to better memory. These are, first of all, we'll talk about these too, but these first questions are related directly to what they studied. These ones are ones where they had to make an inference. They had to go that next step with what they learned. So we'll come to that one, but let's just stay on this direct one. Now look at this, retrieval practice. So here we have a situation where in the bottom case here, we tell them study twice. Okay, study. And then when you're done, go ahead and start at the beginning again and study it again. Versus one where we say study, and now we're going to test you on what you just studied. Okay, so again, they're interacting with the material twice, but once they're encoding and once they're retrieving. Whereas here they're encoding and then they're encoding. And what we see is it's better to study once and then to test yourself on what you studied. Testing really enhances learning. And that's, a core kind of principle. And not only on the stuff you directly studied, but even if you now have to apply that information and make inferences to new situations, this is the best way of getting the information in, to mix your encoding with attempts to retrieve the information. That is the key to doing well on studies like this. And if your encoding was concept mapping too, you do even better. Like if you encoded with concept mapping and then did retrieval, that would be the most powerful way to learn a set of information. Now, some of you might say, well, that's a lot of work. It is. You don't get memory for nothing. You don't. Yeah. So that song, by the way, that's going through my head is called You Can't Have Something for Nothing. You don't get freedom for free. And it's just kind of suggesting that, yeah, if you want something, you got to work for it. And this is a case of that. So by the way, this is why we're doing MTuner. Right? Why we continually test you as you go through to try to give you that sort of retrieval practice. And of course, we have those extra parts in MTuner where you get the second chance and stuff just to try to make that even more powerful. So those are things we've done to try to help you prepare for your final exam. And this is where I always like to say, if you're cheating on your MTuners, if you are somehow finding the answers ahead of time, I'll tell you who you're cheating. You're cheating you. You're not getting the retrieval practice. You're wimping out of the retrieval practice. You're trading a valuable learning experience for an extra couple grades. And then you're going to go to the final exam and you're not going to do so well because you traded in that learning experience. And those people who do the MTuners correctly without cheating are getting the study and they're getting that valuable retrieval practice, and they will kick your butt on the final exam. Do not cheat on MTuners. It's not worth it and it's not smart. I will just throw that out there. Now you hopefully know why. Okay, so now let's just talk about something else. Remember that connecting across study and retrieval? We've talked about study and we've talked about retrieval. I just want to give you some of this quick because it's kind of cool and interesting and weird. And these are, well, this one would be one we call state-dependent learning. There's two very related concepts, state-dependent learning and transfer-appropriate processing. They're very similar. But state-dependent learning, this is the most dramatic kind of thing. It suggests that you will remember something best if your state, when you encoded it, matches your state when you remember it. So classic study. Let's say we have students studying some material, but they're either studying while they're drunk or they're studying while they're sober. And then we test them a little while later. And when we test them, they're either drunk or they're sober. And so these bars, the dark one is when they're sober when we're testing them. The blue bars is when they're drunk. You would think overall they would do better sober than drunk. It's not clear that's true. Maybe a little bit better. But what you really see is that if they were sober when they learned, then they do well on the test if they're sober then too. They do better if they're sober on the test than if they're drunk. But if they were drunk when they learned, they actually do better on the test if they're also drunk then. So the match between these mental states, and this happens for things like emotion too. If you're happy at study and then happy at the test, you do better than if you're happy and then sad. If you're sad at study and sad at the test, you do better. So the more your internal state as you study matches your internal state when you're tested, the better you will be. Okay, the better your memory performance will be. Kind of crazy, but true. And what this says, by the way, is when you're studying, try to get yourself into that same mental state you'll be in the test. I assume you're not going to be drunk during the test. If you are going to be drunk during the test or on some chemical, then you should study on that chemical. Wow, that's weird advice. The better advice is don't be drunk on that test. Don't be on any chemical. And then when you're studying, make sure that matches as well. Okay. It's a more general notion of something we call transfer appropriate processing. And so part of it is your internal state, but also there's the kind of processing that you're doing when you're studying. So the closer the test and study context match, the better will be the transfer. So this is true for internal things like emotional states, like we just talked about, even the drunk kind of thing. But also where it really kind of is relevant is this transfer appropriate processing. And what this is saying is, where is your working memory going to be at the test? What's the sort of problem that it will be facing? Well, what is the problem it will be facing? Multiple choice exams. You're going to be seeing multiple choice questions and trying to solve them. Okay, trying to solve multiple choice. Well then, what's the best way to study? Match that. Somehow bring in that multiple choice way of thinking into your study, because that will match your thoughts, the way you're thinking at test. This is why I highly recommend that when you study, you create test questions. And in fact, I will share with you, in an announcement, I will share with you the manuals we give to our TAs when they create questions for your MTuner. I suggest you look at those manuals and that you, as you study, create some questions. As you think about the material in a multiple choice way, how would I ask a multiple choice question about that? You will be thinking about it in a way that will match how you'll be thinking about it at the test. And it'll lead to the best transfer and the best memory. And there's another potential benefit. If you now know anybody else in the class, you can trade the questions that you created for questions they created. And then you can test yourself on their questions and thereby get retrieval practice, as we talked about. Okay? So here's how to ace my exam. When you're encoding, first of all, while you're passively reading things or passively watching a lecture, remember that depth of processing. Remember to think about it as deeply as you can, connect it to information you already have. And if you're really reading for understanding and reading to connect, and you could use, again, concept maps here, would be very good, then everything's great. But every now and then you're going to find that your mind isn't there, that your eyes are moving, but you're not thinking deeply about what you're reading or seeing or hearing. And in that case, my recommendation is it's time to do something more active now. And what I would recommend is what I just recommended. Create multiple choice questions. Read a paragraph and create a question about it. What this is going to do is it's going to change the way you read. You will start reading and kind of seeing multiple choice questions in the stuff you're reading. Or when you're watching a lecture, you'll start imagining the multiple choice questions that could be asked about that. That is, you are encoding the information in a way that will match how you retrieve it. And that will optimize your learning. And again, if you trade questions, you can also add the retrieval practice. Yeah. So there's the questions. When it comes to retrieval, yeah, make sure you include that retrieval practice. Don't just encode. Practice getting information out of memory. If you created questions while you're actively encoding, you can swap those questions with others and get the retrieval practice. And maybe I'll try to find a way of facilitating that. I wonder how I could do that. If you guys have ideas of how, some sort of depository we could all put our questions on and share them, that would be cool. We'll also provide practice with mTuner. We'll reopen old mTuners. We may even have a practice one. We'll try to give you a little bit of practice prior to the final exam to help you do all this. That is how you ace the exam. That is how you do well. And I hope now that you see this, you can understand how this connects to all the memory stuff you're reading about, learning about, and therefore why it works. This is based on research. This is the best way to do well in a course like mine or any other sort of course where you have to memorize, learn a lot of new information. Cool. Finally, I just want to give you a couple of recommendations. First one, Moonwalking with Einstein. It really relates to that video I'm going to post below. The video about the Memory Olympics. Because this is about a reporter who watched something like your video and said, really, can anybody do that? Could anybody learn to memorize things like that? And so he went about trying to learn. And so they talk about a bunch of mnemonic strategies, but they also talk about whether this is worth your time to do what those guys are doing. And one of the things you find is those guys that are so great at doing all the memory stuff don't tend to be very successful in life. It's not necessarily the case that being able to remember a bunch of stuff is going to make you successful. Remember, it probably has more to do with those skills that I've talked to you about than it does the knowledge you possess. But cool book. I'll recommend it. And also generally in the memory chapter, the movie Memento about encoding, and this guy has brain damage and he cannot encode new long-term memories. It's a fascinating, creepy, well-presented movie. I recommend it very highly. Okay, cool. That's it for my encoding new memories. Am I going to have another lecture in this chapter? I'm not sure. Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am. We have some fun stuff to do. At least one more good lecture in this chapter. Excellent. So let me just finish by coming back at you with, I think, the 14 items. It's been a while, right? I looked at them pretty quickly. Lead, landowner, observer, sock, enthusiasm, division. I always seem to get to division too quick for mine. But anyway, empire, pie, satellite. Can't get that there now. Satellite, toll, cooks, door, embrace, splurge. 14 items in the right order. 5 or 10 minutes after I learned them. And I didn't spend a lot of time learning them, but I learned them in a very careful and specific way, and I still have them. So those of you who like to attend my office hours, if you'd like, ask me what the 14 words are and see if I can still remember them then, because I won't be thinking or looking at them in the meantime. Okay, that's all I'm gonna let those words just kind of disappear, but let's see if they're in my long-term memory. This wasn't my working memory, right? Me being able to retrieve them right now, I wasn't holding on to those with a phonological loop. I let go, but I was able to bring them back, and therefore it's long-term memory. Okay, cool. See you in the next one. Have a great one. Bye-bye.